Grab a cup and start your engines. You're listening to Cars and Coffee on 91.3 WHJE. Good afternoon and welcome to Cars and Coffee on 91.3 WHJE. Unfortunately, the audition computer is not working today, so there was no intro to the show for the live listeners. There will be on the YouTube cut because I'll just put it in. It is the first day of October, which means we are 2 weeks removed from the end of the Indycar season at Nashville Superspeedway. The off-season has already started with a lot of news. So, since we don't have a lot of other stuff to talk about, let's get into the news, and we also have some grievances from a team owner that we are going to talk about today. So going into the IndyCar news, we have two major stories involving Ed Carpenter Racing. Alexander Rossi and Christian Rasmussen will be the two full-time drivers for ECR in 2025. Rossi will be in the 20, and Rasmussen will move over to the 21. Great to see Christian Rasmussen get a ride because Indy Lights driver, of course. I think Rossi's going to bring a lot of really good experience to that team. Another big bombshell involving Carpenter is that Ted Jelov, the guy who owns, among other things, Java House, Splenda, and I forget, he owns something else. But he bought a decent-sized ownership stake in the team, which is going to provide ECR, which is usually like a midfield team with a lot more money to kind of try and move up the grid. You can't develop much in IndyCar, but you can certainly do more with more money. More money is always good. But Ed Carpenter will not be doing all of the oval rounds next year in the 20. He has left the driving duties of the 20 full-time to Alexander Rossi. And now Christian Rasmussen finally gets a full-time ride after doing just the road and street course races and the last three ovals of the year. He finally gets a full-time ride in the 21, replacing Rinus VeeKay, who we really don't know where he's going yet. As the driver market is developing, there really is no other good option for VeeKay to go. You have Juncos, assuming he wants to stay with a Chevy team. We're thinking that Prema Racing is going to hire Robert Schwartzman for the other car. So that really leaves him with Juncos, Coyne, and Rahal. And I think out of the cars that would give him a better shot at the 500, Rinus doesn't bring much money. I doubt he would go with Rahal if his focus is the 500. I doubt that he would want to be on the 10th row in a race that he has qualified top 12 in every single year of his career. I highly doubt that he would go to Rahal unless it's an absolute last resort. Juncos would take the money, but honestly, it's really looking like VeeKay's options are dwindling right now. And that's not going to be a good thing because you have guys like Louis Foster, Linus Lundqvist, Roman Grosjean's could possibly be looking for a new ride. Devlin DeFrancesco's bringing a lot of money. He has a lot of competition. There are maybe 10 drivers for 5 seats right now. The driver market's really heating up, and we are only 2 weeks into the offseason. I can't imagine, with some of the stuff that's been happening these past couple weeks, how crazy the offseason is going to be until we get to St. Pete for the first race of the season at the beginning of March. Moving on to some more breaking news, Michael Andretti has stepped back from his ownership role. He sold his ownership stake to, I forget the guy's name, but he's the owner of Group 1001, which is one of the major sponsors of the Andretti Global outfit. Group 1001 owns Gamebridge, which is the title sponsor for the Indy 500 and the finale at Nashville. And they also sponsor Colton Herta's number 26 Honda full-time. That's a big deal because Andretti is really wanting to expand pretty much everywhere right now. It's really strange that he would pick right now to step away from ownership. He's still going to be involved in the team. He's probably still going to be there every race weekend, or most race weekends. We don't know if this means that the Andretti F1 project is dead in the water, if it wasn't already. But this asks a lot more questions than it answers. He was asked by the media right after he made that announcement, if Roger Penske's ownership of the IndyCar series forced him out in any way, and he said, quote, "I wouldn't give him that much credit." Which, yeah, Andretti's called on Penske to sell the series on multiple occasions. So really, again, this asks more questions than it answers. But it's just such a weird time for you to step down as a team owner. You're still going to be involved. He's still going to be on the, I don't know what excuse they came up with, like strategic team or whatever. He's still going to be there. He's just not going to be there as a member of the structure, to be specific. And that's really all I have to say about the Andretti thing. There's really not a lot of detail at the moment. I'll probably talk about this next week, or not next week, because next week's fall break. I'm gonna have a big show in 2 weeks. That's really all we know at the moment about the Michael Andretti situation. But a situation that has not made fans happy is that there appears to be set in stone plans for the NTT IndyCar Series to return to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But unfortunately, to the angst of the wider fan base, it will not be at Texas Motor Speedway. It will be at a street circuit around Jerry World. Jerry World is the Dallas Cowboys football stadium. Jerry World for Jerry Jones, the owner of the Dallas Cowboys. Really, this is a race that really nobody except for Jerry Jones asked for. Yeah, it's great that IndyCar is back in the Dallas market. Dallas is a huge city, huge sports city, but it's not a good look. And I said the same thing about Nashville too. Not on air, but I said this. I think the same thing about what happened with the Nashville street circuit. You go to a market with a perfectly good oval, at least for us, and you don't make an attempt to go back. So the history with IndyCar Texas Motor Speedway, at least in recent times, 2023 was an absolute barn burner of a race. It had a little bit of everything. Some domination from Pato O'Ward, lapped the entire field at one point, a caution throwing a wrench into everyone's pit strategy, which led to the last 30 laps being basic, like borderline pack racing. That race was great. For 2024, the NASCAR Cup Series moved their one race date at Texas Motor Speedway from September to March. And they moved it to the weekend that IndyCar would have had the 2024 race. Since IndyCar is the lower priority at Texas Motor Speedway, it draws in less revenue for the track, it draws in fewer fans. They got kicked out of the weekend that NASCAR wanted, because NASCAR is the series that brings the big bucks for Speedway Motorsports and Texas Motor Speedway. Speedway Motorsports still wanted IndyCar to be at the track in 2024, but they could not find a date that worked. They wanted to try a late summer date, but that is when NBC was basically blacking out every other sport to air the Olympics. They tried fall, but it was for a multitude of reasons. It was too late in the year. It would have been the season finale. Like, I think the proposed Texas race would have been the proposed fall Texas race would have been like the season finale, because that's the only place they could put it. You'd have to go up against the NFL. Like IndyCar had to go up against the NFL for the season finale on TV. They did not do well. In the market, like the attendance wise, Nashville was great. I talked about this last week. But TV wise, for a series that really should get around 1 million viewers flat on network TV, they only got 440,000. And they were prioritized above NASCAR. NASCAR was on NBC. IndyCar was on USA. That's not a good look. IndyCar didn't want that date. So really, SMI was making the effort to keep Texas on the schedule. It was IndyCar that really choose your opinion here, but they either didn't want to do it or couldn't. But it's not a good look to not attempt to go back, especially when the track really wants you to be there. I think if you find a partner that is willing to promote your race, like what you found with Nashville and Big Machine Records, Scott Borchetta did an incredible job getting people to show up to an oval that's kind of in the middle of nowhere. Like it's not close to the city at all. I think Texas Motor Speedway is around 30 miles outside of downtown Fort Worth. The track is way overbuilt. The track can seat about 110,000 people. IndyCar, I think, drew around 20,000 their last race there. For a race that struggles to break 5 figures, I think the biggest issue that you need to have, or the biggest issue you need to solve, is finding someone willing to promote the race and someone that SMI is okay with promoting the race. Because I think that's one of the only reasons that Nashville was able to move to the superspeedway. They had a promoter. They knew that the race was going to bring in money. They knew that the track was actually going to not look like a COVID race. So I think that's why Speedway Motorsports allowed it. But going to downtown Dallas, especially a parking lot at the Dallas Cowboys football stadium, it's not going to provide good racing. And I don't really think street tracks are more attractive to fans than the ovals are. I think you just need to try harder at the ovals. Because street tracks, yeah, you can't really critique the crowd that much because, how many people are like along the fence line from one corner to another on a 20-row up grandstand. The grandstands at street circuits are quite small. They probably only fit around 1,000 people tops. It's really hard to measure the success of a street course. And the biggest part for the fans, especially watching it on TV, street course races aren't that entertaining. So really, what IndyCar really had to do was walk the line between, do you have a good product for the people there? Which, for a street course, I think if you can walk right up to the fence and see the cars, that's pretty cool. But how many people are you really bringing in above a race in Texas? Yeah, you can take care of the promotion. Yes, Jerry Jones is throwing a lot of money at you to do it. But I'd like to see, once this race happens in 2026, how much better or worse this ends up doing than Texas. It's going to be worse with the fans, for sure. That you're going to have a worse product on TV. Texas was probably the greatest race to watch on TV of 2023. I did not watch the 500 on TV. I was there. I watched every other race on TV. Texas was by far my favorite of the year. We need more super speedways. And for the fans, especially considering what they haven't had, the fans want super speedways. I understand for the money you have street courses for. you get more money out of it. Sure, go for it. It's not a good look when you're stacking the schedule with street courses and you have one big oval. A lot of the times I see people grouping the ovals together. You have the short ovals that are less than a mile and a half, like Nashville, Milwaukee. Basically, every oval on the schedule is not Indy. Nashville, Milwaukee, Iowa, and Gateway. And then you have the super speedways, like Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And you also had Texas. You had Pocono at one point. You have places like Michigan and, at one point, Auto Club, Rest in Power Auto Club Speedway. You have places like that put on great shows for the TV audience, but the fan experience isn't necessarily that good. At the 500, it's better because it's the Indy 500. They pour money into their marquee event, obviously. But at a regular oval, there's not a lot to do. And I think that's a huge issue with IndyCar recently, is that they don't have much to accompany the main race in terms of support. At Texas in 2023, you had the NASCAR trucks, which, yes, that race was okay. It was not great. And also, I think the truck crowd was smaller than the IndyCar crowd, which is really saying something, because the IndyCar crowd that day was really nobody. Like, there's basically nobody there. Pocono had 0 support races. And you had really nothing for the fans to do except sit there. The reason that Iowa and Nashville succeeded so much is, one, you have companies like Hy-Vee and Big Machine willing to pour money into an event to actually make a good event. But on the other hand, you also have stuff for the fans to do. Like at both Iowa and Nashville, you have concerts. And then you also have Indy Next at both of those venues to watch. Like if you get there early, you can watch the Indy Next race, stay, hang around, and then maybe an hour after the Indy Next race ends, watch the whole IndyCar race. You're getting more for the same amount of money, really, if you have support races. And I'm not saying send Indy Next to Texas Motor Speedway. That's how we injure somebody. But at least promote if you ever go back to Texas, promote the fact that it is that high speed, 220 mile an hour, close quarters rodeo. Equate it to a rodeo. That's going to get you people. That's going to get you people in Texas. But really, this looks like a bad move on IndyCar management. Really, they got boxed into a corner. If you're Mark Miles, you will choose money over racing product, because in the long term, money will get your series further. This is one of the decisions where I will not trash Mark Miles for the decision he's made. I would take the money over the racing as well. And there's still, no matter how small of a chance it is, that this race ends up getting turned into a Nashville situation where all of a sudden the street course is not viable, you have to move it somewhere else. There's an oval down the street, and you already have a promoter that is willing to promote your race. That would be, in my opinion, that would be the greatest way for this to end. That all of a sudden the Nashville situation happens all over again. But really, I don't mind a Dallas street race if it's bringing in money, but it really goes back to really improve the street racing product and make people actually enjoy street racing. You need a new car. You need a car that races good everywhere. The street course product in general has been not great. St. Pete this year was not good, but I think it was because of the Penske cars having an advantage and just being completely untouchable. Long Beach was a classic. You had Newgarden, who was good all the way to the end, battling Dixon, who was somehow running a car on an empty tank all the way through traffic. That was a great race. Detroit, absolutely terrible. We should drop that race for Michigan. You need to improve the car. To improve the racing, you need to improve the car. Sometimes making the racing better, and I think NASCAR needs to understand this too with the amount of track reconfigurations they've been doing. Sometimes the issue with the racing is not the track, it's the car, it's the product that you're racing, not where you're racing. That basically concludes my rant about the Dallas street race. But in conclusion, it's a plus that we have more races. It's a negative that it's not at Texas Motor Speedway, which has been a fantastic venue the last couple of years. We had a great finish in 2022 and an all-around banger of a race in 2023. It's a shame that it's not there, but at least it's something. Hopefully we can drop places like Thermal. I don't really have a big issue with the Thermal Club. I don't like that it has a points date. You could keep the $1 million challenge, but do it at like preseason testing and do an all-star race at preseason testing. But don't incorporate it into the actual schedule, because at that point it's just wasting a schedule slot that you could use to quote Mark Miles' favorite phrase, expand into new untouched markets. But that's really it for the news segment. I will go when we come back. I have a breakdown of the letter sent, or the statement released by Zach Brown, the CEO of McLaren Racing, a couple of weeks ago about the direction of the sport. But I'm going to throw a song in between now and then so I can take a break, drink some water, and get the segment ready. This is On the Border by the Eagles. You are listening to Cars and Coffee. Don't go anywhere. Cars and Coffee will be right back on 91.3 WHJE. Hi, if you're listening to this right now, that means you're listening to the YouTube version of the show. I just want to say thank you for listening, and make sure to subscribe so you never miss another show and more highlights from the TWIR channel. Now, let's get back to the show. That was out on the border from the Eagles. Welcome back to Cars and Coffee here on 91.3 WHJE. My name is Nathan Ward. We are back now. We are going to talk about the state of Indycar as McLaren Racing CEO Zach Brown sees it. He says a lot in this article. I am not going to have time to go over it completely. Eventually, I will upload the show to YouTube, and I'll link the article there. It's a racer.com article. It's a great read. Only take you about, 10 minutes to go through it all. He starts the letter, basically, as, IndyCar's doing a lot of good stuff. Hybrid power units, even though, barely, they're practically useless on ovals, but the use of the hybrids ties in back to, we need a new car because the old car is 12 years old and not built for the technology that we're cramming into it. He applauds the new TV deal with Fox, which I think if Fox does a good job producing the races, unlike what they've been doing with their NASCAR Cup races, I think that Fox will be a good change, having every race on network TV. That's going to reach more people. That's going to allow for promotion during huge events. It's going to allow for, IndyCar ads for the Daytona 500. During the Daytona 500, they can be like, oh yeah, IndyCar's on Fox Sports next week. That's massive exposure. I think Fox hosts the Super Bowl every other year, about a month before the IndyCar season. They can promote it then, reach more people. Really, I think that's the big thing. That's the big positive takeaway from what IndyCar's been doing the last couple months is that TV deal. Yes, Fox has not had the best broadcasting quality, but that really comes down to their in-house broadcasters. IMS is doing all their camera work, production in-house, so I don't think the Fox IndyCar broadcasts will have the same issues that the Fox NASCAR broadcasts do. Hopefully, crossing my fingers. But the way I've taken this, so I don't have to recite the entire article, and I can get the segment done in a reasonable amount of time instead of sitting here for hours because I got places to be. I've broken this down into a pros section, a cons section, and a wants section. A section of things that he says in the letter that he thinks that Penske Entertainment is doing good at, doing bad at, and what they can add to better the quality and the situation of the NTT IndyCar series. So, starting positive, we're staying positive here. Going to keep the train rolling. Not for very long, though. Starting with the pros, he says, I touched on this already, that the Fox TV deal will boost domestic audiences for the sport. And I think that's a huge thing. All this talk about going international, all this talk about, schedule a race in Mexico, Argentina, Ricardo Juncos is somehow the representative of IndyCar in Latin America. We should sideline going international until we boost domestic audiences, I think. CART had this problem in the early 2000s. They were spending more money on logistics and flying teams out to Europe and out to Japan, to South America. Yes, those races were great. We really need to go back to venues like Motegi if Honda wants to repave the oval, which unless NASCAR shows up and Honda enters NASCAR, that's not going to happen. We need to boost domestic interest in the sport before going international. Yes, you have more people that could be interested in IndyCar if you go internationally, but you need to expand into markets within the U.S. The U.S. is huge. You really have to take advantage of how massive this country is and how many people live in it to really maximize your exposure. And I think going with a big network like Fox, NBC is a big network, but half of the races were on cable and 2 of the races were on a streaming service that those races were only watched by about 75,000 people. I think going to 17 races, all on Fox, all on big network Fox, is huge for boosting domestic audiences. That's great. Schedule variety. Yes, the schedule is not great, but we are pretty well split. We have 6 ovals. We have more ovals than what we did in 2021. Anything is better than what we had in 2021. We have Milwaukee back. Milwaukee is a huge win for the fans to have that track back on the schedule. Hosted 2 great races this year. I bet it'll host another great race near the end of next year. That's really it for the pros. The cons, adding on to the Milwaukee point. Milwaukee will be a week before the finale at Nashville, which will now be on Labor Day weekend next year. That's not good that it condenses the series into just 6 months. Because even if we go back to if we go back to CART, keep going back to CART. If we go back to Champ Car in 2007, the last season of Champ Car, not a great example, but here's how the scheduling of the series has evolved. The final season of Champ Car started in Mexico in March, I think, around the same time that the IndyCar series starts now. It ended at another track in Mexico in November. Really, this is a call by Fox to not have the IndyCar series interfere with their main product, which is the National Football League, which I completely agree with. IndyCar can't go up against the NFL. I doubt it will ever go up against the NFL unless the NFL just tanks for some reason, which I highly doubt. With the schedule crammed between March and the end of August, you really don't have a lot of time off. Usually, it used to be like teams would usually get 1 to 2 weeks off between races, maybe with a couple doubleheader back-to-back weekends if the races were close enough to each other. You don't have that anymore. You're on track 14 out of the 18 weekends that the season is active. That's going to be way too much strain on teams. That's going to be nuts. You still have basically a 6-week gap, because I really don't count Thermal as a race. Thermal really should not be on the schedule as a points race. You have a gap between St. Pete and Long Beach that's about 6 weeks. Yes, we're going to fill that gap a little bit with Dallas somewhere, but you still have a massive gap where you can move races around. If you can take a race that's in a warmer climate in the summer and move it to before the Indy 500, because you can't move the Indy 500. That's locked on Memorial Day weekend. That kind of splits the season into two halves. The first half is very empty, and the second half is basically an uninterrupted run from the 500 all the way to the end of the season on Labor Day. That's not going to be good for teams. Brown also doesn't like the idea of a non-championship international series, which I completely agree with. This is it's kind of stupid, because really, when you see the drivers out there fighting for every position is more points in the championship, and everyone is looking to advance their championship position. If you have a non-points international race, you're going to be more incentivized to keep the car in one piece and to just bring it home, to not be aggressive, which leads to a worse show for the international fans. I completely agree that international races should count for championship points, and I think the great place to put international races is that 6-week gap between between Thermal and Long Beach, because you have plenty of time to still have a break and still get the teams to say, like, Indy to Mexico City is faster. You can get to Mexico City from Indy, where most of the teams are based, faster than you can get from Indy to LA. So you can easily do Mexico City with that logic. You might be able to air freight everything to Argentina and do a race down there too. I'm not a logistics guy, don't quote me on that. But still, 6 weeks should be plenty of time to fit at least 2 international races in, say, Mexico or Argentina. Mexico and Argentina. Brown wants to also eliminate doubleheader weekends, which on IndyCar's part, they've been doing anyway. The only doubleheader weekend on next year's schedule is Iowa Speedway, which is being bankrolled by Hy-Vee, so I am okay with it being a doubleheader for now. On to the wants section, the things that Zach Brown wants the series to do, which, when we get to this section, and I'm going to end the show with this because there's really nothing else to talk about. Zach Brown has the mind of a fan, at least in this section. He wants to return to U.S. markets like Denver and the Northeast before going international. He said we should really go back to Watkins Glen. Watkins Glen, we are in desperate need of a race in the Northeast. Ever since we lost Pocono really doesn't qualify as a Northeast race anyway. So a return to Watkins Glen would be great. A return to Denver to get another Western race is great, because really we're really only in the Midwest, Florida, and the West Coast. and Alabama, basically. We really need to branch out within the U.S. because, again, the U.S. is huge. You need to take advantage of how many people live here before moving international. But interestingly, he doesn't count Mexico as international. He wants to go back to Mexico. We have a very popular Mexican driver. Mark Miles doesn't think he's that popular, but Pato O'Ward is a pretty popular driver. Pato O'Ward would be able to put butts in seats in Mexico City. Maybe even a street race in Monterrey, Mexico. There you go. You get a street race, you get an international race. Everyone wins. Longer practice sessions. The practice session problem at the moment is twofold for IndyCar teams. They don't have enough tires to do a full practice session, all of qualifying and all of the race. So to save and conserve their tires, they just sit around during the practice session. You need longer practice sessions and better tire allocation so teams can refine their setups to make their cars better for the track. And that, in general, according to Zach Brown, will improve the racing. You need a more transparent race control. In connection to the Fox thing, in connection to the Fox TV deal, he said maybe having a microphone in race control, getting like inside information to how race control makes their decisions is better for fans getting into the sport to see how the sport is officiated, and better for long-term fans to see how decisions they may or may not agree with get made. You need to promote the personalities of the sport. 100 Days to Indy is great. If it's bringing in 100,000 new fans per season, that's a great start. It's not Drive to Survive, but it's a great start. You need more of that. You need to promote the personalities in the cars. You can't just promote the cars. You need to promote the people driving the cars. And speaking of the cars, of course, like basically everyone except for Mark Miles thinks IndyCar needs a new chassis desperately. This car is 12 years old. It's not built for the technology we're cramming into it, like the hybrid system. We had to make the thing incredibly small and practically useless to be able to fit it inside of the bell housing in the back of the car. And it really doesn't do much. You can really only use it for about 4 seconds a lap. It really doesn't add much, but except for the fact you could say, oh yeah, the cars are hybrid now. So in a very, very short summary of what Zach Brown wants, thinks is what he thinks IndyCar is doing well, what he thinks IndyCar is not doing well, what he thinks IndyCar should do in the future. That's a short summary. I'll probably do a whole separate video or podcast or something about it at some point. But that's really all we have. There's no racing this week. Interestingly, IndyCar and Indy Next are done. F1's not back on track until they come back to Austin in October 20th. And IMSA and WEC only have one race left in the year themselves. I have nothing to pick, and really, since there's 2 weeks until I'm doing a show again, probably because of fall break, there's really nothing. We really don't know what's going to happen other than the official announcement of the Dallas Street Race, which is probably going to happen in the next couple of weeks. We really don't know what's going to happen. And if the first 2 weeks of the offseason have been anything to go by, this IndyCar offseason is going to be jam-packed with news. We're going to have a full show, hopefully, every single week for everyone here to listen to. That will be it for this episode of Cars and Coffee. Thank you for listening to Cars and Coffee on 91.3 WHJE. My name is Nathan Ward. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Here's Message in a Bottle by The Police.